In today's deep dive, we take a look at how the World Cup might approach a more isolationist America. But before we take that deep dive, our quick five. First, is it okay to cheer on your opponents? 2, Kevin Durant might be on the move again. 3, some NFL teams are having a rough offseason. And 4, DHS uses an ESPN commentator to attack California Senator Alex Padilla. And then 5, ICE is already impacting international games. I'm Ravi Gupta, and I'm joined by my friend Adisu Demesi. Jason's out this week. Welcome back to the Game Within, where we talk about the business and politics of sports and how each shapes what happened on the field. Adisu, how you doing?
I'm pretty good. How are you doing, man? I miss
Watching
you guys
that
last week.
Department Q.
I am. Robbie has recommended some Netflix shows for me to watch. It's pretty good. I'll probably click on episode 3 tonight.
It's addictive. Like they have a really good pilot where they make you, they zag. They make you think something's going on, and then they're like totally mess with you.
Good show.
About
the Bureau is a show like this. This is a Scottish show, but that one was a French one. But like, I'm into those spy shows, kind of.
The writer is the guy who did Queen's Gambit. He's like a famous writer who's like, I think he did. What's that George Clooney, Jennifer Lopez movie, Out of Sight? I think he wrote Out of Sight. Wow. He's been around the business for a long time.
Wow.
But let's get to sports here. Caitlin Clark had an all-timer of a game, actually in the same weekend that Angel Reese also had an all-timer of a game. But Dave Portnoy has been, on this Caitlin Clark beat for a while. And he pointed out something that for our video audience, they'll be able to see it, but I'll try to describe it to you. Let's just go to this clip.
Just the nerve, the second-year players clearing out that side of the floor.
This is like Larry Bird was so good. The Hawks were slapping each other 5. Like they can't even believe how good she is.
So this is Brianna Stewart, who's the best, one of the best players in the Liberty, probably the best player in the Liberty, one of the best players in the WNBA, kind of laughing as Caitlin Clark hits a 3. And Portnoy's voice you heard there is referring to when the Atlanta Hawks were like, high-fiving each other as Larry Bird was having an epic game. And I think the question to Disu is it okay to cheer on your opponents while you're playing them?
Yeah, I think the answer is yes and no, right? But like this was one, I'm not sure Caitlin was on a generational heater like Larry Bird was in that Hawks game. I think he dropped 60 or something like that. She dropped 32 in this game. Not, to be clear, the Fever beat the Liberty. It was the Liberty's first loss. Liberty are the defending WNBA champion, so it was a big deal. But you have to acknowledge at some level your opponents when they are doing something that is unbeatable. And the old adage in basketball is good offense beats good defense. And like, for the non-video listeners here, Stewart played pretty good defense on this play and just got step back threed in true sort of Caitlin Clark, Steph Curry fashion. And, just got to pat your opponent on the back a little bit. So I don't see anything wrong with this, but of course the haters are going to hate and say this is playing nice and you got to be nasty and what have you. But like, look, Caitlin is good. And when your opponent's good, acknowledge it and then go beat them on the other end.
Well, you think about also, you were just at the French Open. There is a culture in tennis of if there's a particularly wild shot, people will do the whole clap thing. Like, so there is in certain sports a culture of acknowledging when your opponent does something crazy. And if you take it to the playground, it's more common outside of organized sports. So if you're playing with your friend and you're having fun, you're going to acknowledge when somebody does something crazy. And I also think like, if you put yourself in the shoes of athletes, the critique is, well, it's not like, you've lost your edge, you're not intense enough. But if you think about how you play, like, at least for me, I play better if I'm a little bit at ease. And if I'm like kind of acknowledging somebody else and having fun with the sport and the game, I tend to play better. So in this case, like actually relaxing a little bit and being like, all right, like you did something cool, I'm gonna acknowledge it, and like I'm not gonna take everything too seriously, could actually make you play better.
It depends though, right? Like the Kobe Bryants, the Michael Jordans, I don't know who the tennis equivalent would be, but they're Yvonne Lendl, he was like a machine. Bjorn Borg, I guess. In the old days, like there is an archetype of athlete that is like a stone cold killer. And I think because a lot of them have been, I mean, Michael Jordan, one of the greatest ever in my opinion. Kobe Bryant, same. One of the greatest ever. Like you get those kind of players are more lionized for their killer instinct, Mamba mentality, you name it, over competitiveness, hyper competitiveness. But I just think that that's just like, that's how some people are wired. And other people are wired to like have fun and kick ass while doing it. And it clearly seems like Caitlyn, although Caitlin's kind of a killer, but like Brianna, they are more likely to, and maybe it's WNBA players in general, maybe it's women, like I don't know what it is, but that's obviously I think what we're going to get into here next. But like there is you want to acknowledge skill and talent, and when people do something remarkable, you're more likely to tip your cap than you are to turn into a panther and try to rip the other person's face off. And I don't honestly see a qualitative difference between the two, but I get why in our culture, I think the latter is more revered, I guess.
Yeah, you watched, you were there in Paris for Alcaraz. He's a different archetype. Yeah, he's pretty intentional at it, but he's pretty at ease on the court, even to the point where he's calling balls in favor of his opponents. It's almost like he floats above it all. I can't even, I'm trying to think of who's the equivalent in sports who even has that kind of attitude. I was searching my brain. I'm sure there's somebody, but
I mean, some people can flip a switch, right? Who can be like sort of Steph Curry, who's like, my favorite player on my favorite team, is kind of like this, where he just, he's stroking threes and having a good time, and then he has kind of an assassin mode. And I think that is probably more like what most players are like. The Michael Jordans and Kobe Bryants are like rare. I think they're actually probably more Alcarazes in the world than there are Jordans, which I guess, they're both great. So, or Federer's in the world, who is like the ultimate gentleman and also the greatest player ever, versus Jordan, who is like the ultimate asshole and the greatest player ever. Just two sides of the same coin.
Yeah. Yeah. You think about Curry in that Olympics against France. If you were playing against him, it's got to take a lot of restraint. Obviously, it's devastating for France because I still think about those games and how seriously everybody took them. But it's like at a certain point when he knocks down like the fourth one or something, you're just like, you've always got to laugh. You're like, this is crazy. Like I'm like, I can't help.
What can you do?
Yeah, it's like almost hilarious how crazy
it's a what can you do moment, right? Like especially when you're on defense, right? It's you rarely see somebody acknowledge a good defensive play against them. Rarely. Sometimes in football, like if a cornerback breaks up a pass, and sometimes you'll see the receiver like give him a little whatever. More likely, but it's usually more the player on defense who just has to be like, look, I did everything. And I think Batum talked about that in the Court of Gold about Steph in the gold medal game, where it's just like, we played the best defense we possibly could. It was 10 out of 10, and it turns out he was just better than us. And at some level, you have to laugh.
It reminds me of the Alcaraz situation, because Sinner played an incredible match. It's just Alcaraz was just out of this world. They both kind of were. It was just a crazy combination. So one piece of context here is Breanna Stewart, I think, comes out of the UConn program. And there's like a dynasty of UConn, for people who are not familiar, where they dominate the WNBA. They've dominated college basketball for a long time. And their coach is this guy, Gino Auriemma, who's a bit of a character. And again, Dave Portnoy has taken it upon himself to flack for Caitlin Clark. And one of the things he did was dig up this Gino clip from when Caitlin Clark was first coming in the WNBA. Let's go to this clip.
The delusional fan base that follows her disrespected the WNBA players by saying she's going to go in that league and tear it apart.
But they've got Caitlin Clark.
These people are so disrespectful and so unknowledgeable and so stupid that it gives women's basketball a bad name. If you're a WNBA player, they were tremendously disrespected.
Clark, another long three. She's back.
Diana said it best. This kid's in for a rude awakening.
Second in a row. Clark stays red hot.
This kid's on the wrong team. She's got the wrong skill set to handle the physicality of that league. I think she talks a lot of so she deserves everything she gets because she gives it as good as she gets. She's just not built for the physicality of this league.
Clark nails it.
Wow. for the listeners.
Yeah, Barstool. They're overlaying her, just killing my team, New York.
Shout out to the Barstool video editor there for a great super cut of
Caitlin. What a horrible take, though.
Raining threes.
Like
it was a terrible thing.
It's weird. The arrogance of it all. I love this because I want more shit talking in sports, but the arrogance of Gino and what he's saying is like that's a pretty like crazy take. Like even in the moment, because like even if you're gonna be right, like why take that risk? Like that's just a very sharp take to be like, here's this person who is lighting up the college basketball, and you're basically like putting it all out there saying she's going to fail in the WNBA.
But 9 out of 10 times you're going to be right.
Right.
But to your point, for that 10th time where you actually have a transcendent athlete who is already one of the 5 best, 10 best, whatever players in the WNBA, and in her second year, and frankly, she was in her first year, probably towards the end of it, like you look like a dummy. But it is, it goes back to the hate that I think comes to Caitlin Clark. And I don't know why Portnoy has taken this up as his, there's a lot wrapped up in why Portnoy has probably taken this up as his cause celebre. But like, he's not wrong about this one. Like, she is great. She might not be the best player in the league, but she's one of the best. And she's 23 years old. And the haters wanted her to fail, right? For any number of reasons. The UConn people, because she's not a UConn person. There are people who think it disrespects the league to have a rookie be good or have a white player be the best player in the league or potentially the white. But like when it comes down to it, she's on the court and her peers, and I think, it's interesting. Brianna Stewart, also white for what it's worth. I think she's getting a probably different treatment from her black peers, I would guess, especially opponents, I should say, probably not her teammates. But regardless, like, what she's doing on the court, she comes back from an injury after 2 weeks and drops 32 points in her first game back. Like you can't argue with you can't argue with the results.
I love the bitterness though. I wish more people talked like this, and you're talking about like what's going on with Portnoy. But there's this Barstool a YouTube show called Sunday Conversations. Have you ever seen this?
No.
It's like almost between two ferns. It's actually really funny. The guy who does it has like a mullet, and he interviewed Shane Gillis this week. And in the interview, he does a very subtle but really funny like Caitlin Clark thing. And he's like, Shane Gillis, you're a Caitlin Clark fan. I am too. And then they kind of like, you know where they're going with this, and they know where they're going with this. And then he goes, if Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese were the Civil War, who would be the North and who would be the South? And you could see Shane Gillis, like the wheels.
Don't get canceled again. Don't get canceled. Or maybe he did want to get canceled again.
To his credit, he paused and he was like, well, Angel Reese is from Louisiana, so she'd be the South. And I was like, smart move. Smart move. But it was like a funny, subtle way to be like, let's all acknowledge like what's really going on here in this. But when it's not all dark and weird, I love the shit talking. I like the pettiness.
It's great for women's basketball. We have talked about it on this podcast like 5 times. I watched the Fever coming to San Francisco to play the Valkyries on Thursday. Like, it's going to sell out. It's going to be an incredible atmosphere. Like, this is what the sport needs. It needs villains. It needs heroes. It needs controversy. It needs on the court, off the court. That's what makes the NBA great. That's what makes a lot of sports great. And I think the WNBA, like, it's not quite there because I think there's too much fighting about the peripheral stuff still to just focus on the fact that the on-court stuff and the sort of the drama surrounding the sport is actually the traditional like sport-related drama is actually good enough to sustain. But like, it's very close to being a, mainstream top tier professional sport, which is pretty awesome. And it has a lot to do with Caitlin Clark, not to mention Angel Reese, not to mention Asia Wilson. Like, it's a lot of players, but Caitlin is the top of that list. Like, hate it or love it, she is.
Yeah, I had this experience actually. I work from the one hotel in Brooklyn on a lot of mornings, and I didn't realize this, but they're like the official hotel of the visiting teams. And I forget what team. I think it might have been Vegas. And I noticed like for 4 days in a row they were there. Like you could just see they're hanging out in the lobby and everything. And I was like, why are they here for 4 days? They weren't playing any team on the East Coast. And I realized I was looking at the schedule. I was like, whoa, WNBA doesn't play a lot of games. So I was like, they're actually on the East Coast for one game.
Yeah.
Yeah, they played Brooklyn. I think they played Connecticut like 4 or 5 days later. But they were staying in that hotel for like 5 days without a game because there's so few games. I just thought that was interesting. Well, we on to men's basketball here.
Yeah, let's talk about some offseason. Although the final's still 2-2, still going on, but we're already deep into the offseason drama.
If a tree falls in the woods.
Yes, exactly. Kevin Durant, for the fourth time now, I think, third time, is looking to choose his next trade destination. But the Suns, his current team, are not signaling they are going to follow his wishes this time. For those who aren't following the ongoing Kevin Durant saga that has essentially been going on for a decade now, KD still one of the 10 best players in the league. I think he made second or third team All-NBA again this year at 36, 37 years old. He's on an expiring contract next year. He's going to get paid almost $55 million. But the Suns suck. They didn't make the playoffs this year despite having a big three, at least a big two in Booker and Durant, and championship aspirations. And so it does look like Durant is on his way out of Phoenix. The Miami Heat, San Antonio Spurs, and Houston Rockets, Durant said this week, were his preferred trade destinations, Shams reported. But ESPN, Suns sources are telling ESPN essentially they are not promising to send Durant to any of those destinations. They're open to it if the deal is good, but Suns are in deep shit. Let's be as a franchise after all they traded away to get Durant. They traded away Mikal Bridges, who's now on the Knicks, Cam Johnson, Jay Crowder, 4 unprotected first-round picks, and a pick swap to Brooklyn to get Kevin Durant just a couple years ago, and they are not going to get that much now. So what do you think, Ravi, of this trend both towards and away from basically players being able to pick their trade destinations, and what this whole Durant saga means?
Well, this is an interesting in-between because he's not going to quote-unquote get his way, but by signaling which teams he would sign an extension with, he can maximize the chances that those teams will hear that and offer more, which means that like it's actually like I think an appropriate use of the public square in these types of situations. I'm not a huge fan of I will only go to X, Y, and Z team, and because it implies you won't play and you're really screwing with your team. But he has a right to say what he would like, where he would extend beyond his contract. And I think that's totally appropriate. And it's a smart move. And I think it helps everybody involved, right? Because like it basically tells, because if there is uncertainty about any team he's going to, then that just means that you're going to have a limited offer from everybody. So in some ways he's saying, okay, these 3 or 4 teams that I'm going to mention are going to potentially offer my team even more. So they win and I win. So I actually really like it.
The difference here is, though, that Durant's at the end of his career. All right, he's 30. This is probably the last contract he's going to get of any significance. The one that he gets after his current contract expires at the end of next year. And so I'm not sure he has the leverage he thinks he has because, I mean, to be fair, he can sign wherever he wants after next year. But he can extend. There's risk in that, right? Like, what if he tears his Achilles again or an ACL, during the season, and he doesn't re-sign with the team that he eventually gets traded for? Suddenly, his career might be over, and certainly his earning potential is over. So, I'm not sure if he were a 28-year-old or even a 31-year-old like Giannis player. Yeah, what you said I think would be more operable, but I'm a little worried. Like, I kind of get where the Suns are coming from here, even though I'm generally in favor of players for all the reasons you said, getting to at least pick a little bit about where they want to go work. But I think the Suns, they have to recoup maximum value for him wherever it comes from. And the team that gets him, if it's pick a team, the Knicks, that is not on his list, if they offer him an extension, it's going to be real hard for him to.
He'll take an extension with the Knicks.
He'll take an extension from anybody. So, what is it? He is doing, I think, the right thing, but I also think that this is one of those moments where the Suns are actually doing the right thing for them. And ultimately, wherever he ends up is going to be they're basically just like what happened with Jimmy Butler and the Warriors at the trade deadline. You're buying somebody for 2 years here, and whoever is willing to pay him 100 and whatever million for 2 years is the team that's gonna get him.
You know, I think the proper role for the Kevin Durant's of the world, maybe even LeBron now, this happened with Draymond, this happened with Westbrook, is 6-man. Like a hybrid 6-man starter, depending on what's going on, you may move them into the starting lineup if all the rest is appropriate or whatever. But the default is that they're like somewhere between a 6-man and a starter. They get these like medium tier minutes. That's where Durant should be. Like, I think that like it minimizes the risk of injury. It gives him something that resembles his role on the Olympic team, you know, where he like comes in and he just goes on a heater, you know, but you're not like, at least in the regular season, you're not risking too much, you know? And then if you can always turn the spigot on, like I think what happened with Draymond, once you're in higher stakes games, but you're like, all right, like let's limit the amount of burn with this person, you know?
I disagreed with everything you said until you said regular season, which I think you can't be wrong about that. Like, I'm sorry to keep bringing up the Warriors, but it's true of any team, right? Like, the Warriors have to ride Steph Curry to make the playoffs, to beat the Rockets, and you can't tell me that that's not maybe the main reason why he got injured in game 1 against the Timberwolves and why the Warriors lost the series. And so you have to optimize your investments like the older guys for April and May. And the season is so long. Like, it starts in October. You know, and you're a 37-year-old man who's torn his Achilles and broken his foot or whatever he did when he was in OKC. Like, should you be playing 36 minutes or 33 minutes a game in January? No, you probably should be playing, to protect your investment, 25, 30 minutes. And then, 40 minutes in the playoffs when you can. Unfortunately, the reality is I don't think you can do that and make the playoffs. Like, look at what just happened this year with the Suns. Like,
right.
he needs to go to a good enough team that can make the playoffs without.
This is where Knicks could be interesting.
Production.
I usually the Knicks, I don't think it's going to happen with the Knicks, but because the salary cap is too tough. But the ideal destination is something like the Knicks, because what is the Knicks' problems this year? It was depth, and they turned to depth at the very end of the Pacers series with players who didn't get a lot of practice in games throughout the regular season, right? Nobody thinks Kevin Durant needs practice in these big games, right? So the ideal circumstance is that he goes to a team like the Knicks. He limits his minutes to like 20 minutes a game during the regular season. All these other players get experience. You'll win enough games, you'll make the playoffs. Like, there's no question that team makes the playoffs unless there's some catastrophic injuries. And then everybody's got the right experience now. You've got all the depth that you need. And Durant is hopefully, like, you've managed the risk enough there, you know?
Yeah. I don't disagree. I just think there's business in this too, right? Which is people pay to watch Kevin Durant play. And if you're playing him 22 minutes a game during the regular season, you are not using your business asset to its greatest. He can drop. And look, let's be real. While he has been injured and he's old, he also is a 50, 40, 90 guy still. He's
right.
Still one of the 15 best players in the NBA, and I don't see any reason why he won't be next year. So it's a tough balancing act between that reality and also the business reality is that he is one of the top 10 stars, would you say, still in the NBA? Like, did you see the Magic Johnson thing this week? I thought that was brilliant. We should have probably put this on a quick 5, but he was asked to define what a superstar is, I think talking about Halliburton. And he said, somebody who sells out the building on the road. And I was like, that's the most succinct, wonderful definition of a superstar that I've ever heard.
And I think the implication is that Halliburton isn't, and I agree.
Isn't yet, right? I don't think he is yet, right? He could be, but point is, Kevin Durant, like, he's right on the borderline.
But I think SGA is not a superstar by that definition either.
He's not. Yeah. But Kevin Durant is, right? LeBron James obviously is. The old heads are, and I bring this all up to say, if you're bringing Kevin Durant on for 2 years, $100 million, you're not just bringing him on for his performance on the court, though that's the main reason. You're also bringing him on because he's a marketable superstar. And if you play him less or sit him out games or whatever, you are depreciating that asset. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see where he goes, but I ultimately think the Suns. I think both sides are doing the right thing, and I hope he ends up. I mean, shit. I hope he ends up back in Golden State, but I hope he ends up on a team like the Rockets, or not the Heat. I think like the Rockets, who's like already good, and he can both play less and be kind of exactly what that team needs.
Well, he mentioned the Spurs, which would be incredible.
Spurs would be incredible.
Yeah.
But I hope the Suns also get, like, they're not going to recoup equal value, but I don't want to see the Suns suck I don't like to see any team suck for 10 years either. And that's where they may be in danger of doing that if they don't just extract max value.
My final thought on this is like the idea of like a Kevin Durant, like hybrid 6-man starter championship run with a young Wemby and a really tenacious Spurs team in his home, the state that he went to college in Texas, would be a poetic ending to a career that has been really puzzling and weird. So that would be like, and I think it would shut the door on this like championship hunting narrative about him, where I think people, even though he'd be going to a team that has a lot of talent and a lot of promise, I think a lot of people would respect that championship more than his Golden State championships because of how unique it is. And the fact that he'd be on the first of this Spurs team to do it. And I think people would just love that relationship between him and Wemby. If you remember, he went up to Wemby after that game and they had some good words. That would be cool. I would be all for that. And I love the Spurs. Spurs are like my non-Knicks team that I root for. I respect it.
It's hard not to root for them as a franchise. They've done it the right way, basically. I mean, a lot of luck with drafting Wemby and Tim Duncan and what have you, but like they've built it the right way, and it would be cool to see him come and be like the final piece for the Rockets. But I think you're right. The Spurs would be the ultimate cool way for him to go out with his last 2 or 3 years in the league.
Well, let's talk about the NFL here. We've got, a lot of teams have just done their mandatory OTAs, basically the mini training camps where now you get to figure out who's truly disgruntled or not. And thankfully we in my team, we had a contract dispute with James Cook, but he showed up and everybody's like, all right, well, at least
let's not talk about the quarterback situation in Atlanta and just skip right to well, we still have some issues in the dirty ATL. But anyway.
Yeah, you get to see where the drama is. And one team that stood out to me here is the Miami Dolphins. So they have this player, Bradley Chubb, defensive end. He told the media that, well, let's go to his original clip. This is from 2023. This is Chubb talking about a culture change. This is under the relatively new coach, Mike McDaniels.
I can't really put my finger on it, man. Just guys just buying in with one another, you know what I mean? And just that brotherhood. I don't know how it builds, but it's just organic here, and guys love each other. The guys play for one another, and I feel like that's what's caused some of the success, you know what I mean? That's part of it. Once you're playing 10 times harder for a guy because you know what he has off the field, it makes you grow closer as a team, and that's what we need in this time of the year.
So that was then. He then now says in 2024, he says, I'm going to say last year we were lying, honestly, point blank period. We felt it. We put our toe in the water, but we didn't dive in all the way. We didn't get all the way there with each other. We weren't making the effort to go the extra mile. And I would say this year we're doing that. And this is basically saying they were lying about the culture change. This prompted the coach, Mike McDaniels, say it would have been awesome if you would have told me on the front end when they were lying. Beyond that,
I wish we had a video clip of this because Mike McDaniel is just a hilarious dude. Anyway,
beyond that 2024, unless I'm using it directly for an analogy, I'm much more concerned with 2025. You can go through it, but I'm a close observer of the Dolphins at DC because they play in my division.
Yeah.
And I would say I have never been less concerned about a team than the Miami Dolphins over the past few years, who every year people say they're going to be coming at our crown of the AFC East and all that. And these could be famous last words. That could be Gino Arrieta on this pod. But, and then maybe they will. But Mike McDaniel came in and everybody's like, this guy, he's a wizard. He's the next Sean McVay or whatever. And I would just say he's kind of a goofball, and I just don't take him seriously. Like, they're just messy team who seem to make all these promises and just seem really goofy. Like, and it's just like, I'm like, yeah, you're cool. You have shades, you have like interesting clothes, and like you talk to your players like they're friends. But it's like, at no point have you put a product on the field that is any way resembles what the Ravens have been doing, the Chiefs have been doing. You know, I just haven't been as scared of them as any other team that have been so-called contenders against us.
Well, they did have one good year. I forget what year that was, a couple of years ago, when I guess it must have been 23, when they were number 2 in points, number 1 in total offense. Yeah, 2023. Explosive with Tyreek Hill, and that was the first year I think Tyreek Hill came from the Chiefs, and he was being called a wizard, etc. I think this is kind of just what happens when you are A, quirky, like you said, B, you come in and have early success, but that success doesn't sustain.
Yeah.
And where are we now? He started in 22, so this will be season 4. There's something about, I think that just happens with coaches. Like, if you haven't won by season 4, and they haven't won, did they even win a playoff game? I don't think so.
I don't think so, because we beat them a couple times in the first round. Yeah.
If
they
you
didn't
haven't
even
won
make
a
the
playoff
playoffs
game
last year. So.
They didn't make it last year. The year 2 years ago, they didn't win. They lost. They always lose in cold weather. Everybody knows that, right?
They didn't even make it. I think we clinched the AFC East with 6 games to go in the season. Like, there was just nobody made a run at it.
The act wears thin without success, and that is essentially what I think has happened with the Dolphins. And what happened with Tyreek Hill at the end of last season. With him, I don't even remember exactly what he said, but basically like saying I'm out, and then reversing course, over the offseason. It just shows that McDaniel doesn't have. He seems to be a bit of a front runner, and I don't mean that in a negative way on him. But it's like when things are going well, his thing works. When things are going poorly, it seems to kind of fall apart. And that's probably true of most coaches, but the really great coaches and the really great teams and the really great organizations like the Spurs we just talked about are the ones where, like, when they're 19-63 or 63-19 in the NBA, or 4-13 or 13-4, you kind of have the same culture, and it doesn't feel like that for the Dolphins.
Yep. Well, another team that's got some weird vibes are the Bengals. Now, there are 2 layers to this story. One is they've got a couple of like high-profile, acrimonious contract negotiations. One's with Trey Hendrickson, and one is with their first-round draft pick, Shamar Stewart. Neither of those, on the face of it, like I know some people are like, like pointing to this as some kind of problem. Like, what's really going on is they prioritized extending their wide receivers, and that's really a Burrow thing. So I get that. And you want to have an identity. And part of what that team's identity is that the Burrow, Higgins, Chase combo is like the sort of core of the team that they build around. And I get that. And you got to make other hard choices, but that's what
they're going to win a lot of 35-28 games is like clearly where they're headed.
Yeah, I think what people are pointing to is like, they had a weird season. They underperformed in like a baffling way last year, where they just lost a lot of close games, and it got their defense was just horrendous. But they also got this report card, the Players Association gives this report card, and the Bengals were ranked 24th out of 32 teams and received F- grades for family treatment, F for food and dining, C for ownership. But they did get an A for their head coach and an A+ for their locker room. And what that means is a very uneven report card. It's just like there's something organizationally screwed up there that's not the coach's problem. Like, it's something with the general management of the team.
Yeah, it's weird. The rookie thing I think is particularly strange, but Stewart has said publicly, like to the press, that he has the support of his locker room. But you would think that in any normal circumstance, a rookie sort of fighting about millions of dollars, I think he's fighting about.
It has to do with guaranteed money, I think. Like,
what's guaranteed? Which, again, it's more that he's a rookie, and I'm not sure that, like, a 6-year vet who has never made, if you're like a second string D lineman, you probably have never seen the money that is this first round pick is being offered, would naturally support that. So it does suggest that this is like something that everybody on the team has, if we are to take what he says is true, it's a bigger problem that everybody kind of knows is there, but doesn't talk about explicitly with like the organization and not the team. And that I would include the coach in that because he got an A or A plus from the
Well,
players,
I think there are
right?
two things going on here in the background, potentially. This is my guess. One is there's an unspoken rule in the NFL and in any sport really that players don't get involved in the business side of things, that you always have your teammates back on negotiations no matter what they're doing. And the only exceptions are if it's like you're heading into the playoffs or something and somebody's holding out, or you're in week 4 and this guy still hasn't shown up and you guys are now 1-3 or something. And that's when those situations happen, you start to see some comments from players. But generally speaking, off-season negotiations, they never weigh in. I think the second thing is, I think the extensions on their wide receivers, the big ticket extensions, probably have ricocheted throughout the locker room where some of the other players, and maybe this is a defense thing, they're just like, we're getting shortchanged, and maybe that's the conversation going on behind the scenes, and maybe there's a combination of those two things going on, where it's like a defense-offense thing, or a outside of the big three, everybody else is getting screwed conversation, which you can imagine, like high likelihood that's going on behind the scenes.
I mean, Trey Hendrickson is one of the best D linemen in the league, and he was offered. Shout out to Philip for getting this. He was offered $28 million a year. Whereas Myles Garrett got offered 40 or signed a $40 million a year contract. Max Crosby got 35. So, and he certainly was on par with them last year as a defensive player. So, like, they are offering below market, or what I would say is below market for their homegrown players on defense. Whereas Jamar Chase, I'm not mistaken, got the biggest contract in non-quarterback NFL history. So I would love to see a Cincinnati Bengals Hard Knocks midseason.
Yes.
They're
doing the Bills.
Chance of
they're doing the Bills this year. They're doing
the
midseason
or in
Bills.
the
I think it's
midseason. The midseason is great, but it's honestly, it's a good call, Robbie. I think it might be like an offense-defense thing subtly. When your top 3 offensive players got contracts for what, $500 million, like it's human nature, man. You're going to be a little jealous, a little in your feelings about it, especially if you feel like you're getting shortchanged.
Well, you also, last year, all the criticism was of the defense. So if you're like a defensive player and you're like, okay, well, they're not investing in defense and they're telling us we're the problem and they're reinvesting in offense, it's like you're like, well, okay, like then get off our back because you're not going to invest in players around me. Yeah. Well, let's pivot. Let's talk about your home state of California.
Let's talk about my home state of California and a little politics. Department of Homeland Security, you may have seen, private, I think it was the personal security for the Secretary Noem, took down literally, physically, and handcuffed my home state senator, Senior Senator Alex Padilla, over the weekend. And none other than Stephen A. Smith always finds his way into everything these days. Jumped right into the debate surrounding that treatment. First, let's show a video of the altercation for those who might be under a rock and missed this happening earlier. I guess it was Friday.
Guys, ready? And bell. Sir, hands up. I'm Senator Alex Padilla. I have questions for the Secretary, because the fact of the matter is a half a dozen violent criminals that you're rotating on your hands up.
Many of our ICE agents have been docked.
On the ground. Hands behind your back. Hands behind your back.
If you let my hands.
Goddamn shame. U.S. Senator right there, again, being manhandled by the FBI. He was handcuffed after the clip for those who haven't seen it or who are listening here. Anyway, Stephen A. found his way to the middle of this one, spent no time attacking, not the FBI, not the Secretary, but Senator Padilla in what's become a little commonplace with my man right now. So here's Stephen A.
Here you have this Senator, Alex Padilla. Can Kristi Noem speak? Could you have waited till she finished to ask your questions? To shout your questions? You are a senator, right? You couldn't wait? So that was just you out of control because you were just losing it up. You, a United States Senator, couldn't compose yourself and let the head of Homeland Security finish her thoughts before you asked the question. Couldn't do that, huh? Couldn't do it, huh?
Well, you'll be.
Can me understand what's going on here? What is the show like? Is he now doing political commentary?
No, it's his regular show. He has a radio / YouTube show that I don't know if it's daily, but it's separate from ESPN. It's obviously separate from First Take and his NBA stuff. He just does it, and he's had political figures on. He had my old boss Cory Booker on some point, I think last year. So it's like, it's not a political show, but it occasionally, as you heard and saw just then, wades into political issues. But yeah, Robbie, what do you think? I mean, A, what do you think of the commentary? But B, what do you think about both this happening and what it says about sort of the crossover between politics and sports these days?
Yeah, I think like this is totally contextual. If this is like, Secretary Tom Ridge in a different era where like we're respecting norms and like, there are 1,000 other things that you could take for granted in society, then I would say that this interruption would absolutely be like, I would have a lot of questions about it. Obviously, the thing is, I don't have the whole clip of everything that's happened before and after this, or I saw the after, but I would be sympathetic to an argument about decorum in most eras of American society. We happen to be in an era of American society in which this administration has abandoned, decorum and a lot of other things. And so I am wildly sympathetic to somebody trying to intervene, interject, make life hard for people who don't have any respect for the law, decorum, norms, etc. I mean, look, we're speaking on a day where, Trump, I think either today or yesterday, was asked about whether he would call Governor Walz of Minnesota, and because there was a political assassination going on there, and he took it as an opportunity to talk about how horrible Walz is in the middle of this crisis going on there, and also where Elon Musk,
the killer is still on the loose again. Remember, like literally
when that happened,
when Trump made these comments,
So it's like, come on now, like.
It also,
I want those norms to be upheld. We just don't live in a society in which this administration is in any way trying to nurture those norms. And until they do, forgive me for not caring about the norms.
I think it has been, to talk politics, and then I'll talk about Stephen A. On the political side, I couldn't agree more. When only one side is playing by the rules, that's not a game, right? That anybody wants to play. And so, ostensibly, Senator Padilla has tried to get a meeting with the secretary because he is the senior senator of the most populous state in the country with a major immigrant population. It would make sense that you would at least be able to talk to the Department of Homeland Security secretary, but that hadn't happened until he took this opportunity to do what he did. Second, the secretary could have acknowledged his existence and actually made herself look good if she had any political skill whatsoever by doing what you just said, Robbie, and just saying, hey, Senator, let's talk after this. Why are you making this into a whole scene? But instead chose to ignore him. And third, he was taken down to the ground by FBI agents and handcuffed. And that is not what we do in America, or at least it wasn't until, as you said, the norms have been broken. Stephen A. is being, I think he knows his audience. If I'm giving him, let me start with giving him credit. He knows his audience, and he knows he's been rumored as a Democratic presidential candidate, or potentially a presidential candidate in the future. And one of the worst things I think about sports and sports commentary in the sort of last couple of years, and it's gotten worse in the last in this year since Trump became president, is this desire to show that you are sympathetic to Trumpism. Let's just keep it blunt, right? And the sort of chauvinism and all the things that go with it, because that's where the culture seems to be going. And I think what Stephen A. is doing here is taking the opportunity where, like you said, this is probably like in a normal world, this is a 50-50 thing where you can see both sides, but this is not a normal time. He knows better, but he says this is an opportunity for me to show that that I can be Trumpy when I need to be, and like I'm going to take a free swing so that I can attract more right leaning and right wing listeners, watchers, etc. It is pretty brazen. He's a very smart guy, so
Well,
I'm not surprised, but I'm also kind of disgusted.
There's a world where I could understand what he is saying if you don't know all the context of what Kristi Noem is doing, et cetera. And maybe that's true, but then maybe you should probably be a little less confident in your take. Like, be informed about how awful this Homeland Security Department has been, and that she's, basically a YouTuber masquerading as a Homeland Security secretary, where she's going and posing with prisoners in an El Salvadorian gulag, the same gulag that we're sending Americans to, or at least people who were here legally over there without due process, right? Like that this is that person, and that so the context is really important. Also important to note that Homeland Security tweeted out Stephen A's video and said what Stephen A said. Oh, well, let's stay on this topic of sort of the federal law enforcement overlap with sports, which unfortunately is a topic, not a topic that would have been a hot topic in the past few years, but certainly is right now. This is we have a major ICE presence and CBP presence, Customs and Border Protection, at some major soccer games happening in the U.S. Let's go to this clip from the Dan Labertard show.
So ICE is going to be doing, quote, security for some of these games. Why? I have no idea. And ICE told NBC Miami that non-American fans going to these games need to show proof of legal status. Just take that sentence. This is the United States of America. This is such a foreign concept, something that, again, growing up underprivileged, I've never even considered. Like, my baseline of all the struggle, and again, I've been listening to the show since I was in college and a dumb college kid. Now I'm just a dumb 30-year-old. So you guys have helped me expand my horizons on all this, and it's just not something I could ever have assumed that would happen in the United States. So that's where that starts.
Yeah, I mean, and let's couple this with our deep dive, which is we've got the World Cup coming here, and yeah, I think this whole combination, and there's a whole deep dive into exactly what they're doing at these games and why they're at these games. But we've got the Olympics, and then we've got the World Cup, and I'm just left wondering whether we deserve to be hosting these events right now, given how inhospitable our country is to people from other countries. Like, it is, if I had the option to come to the United States from any country that has an insecure relationship with the United States, where there's even a sliver of a chance that I could be sent to El Salvador or detained or, not let into the country because there's some kind of erratic change of policy and I've spent all this money on tickets, I would pretty much, unless I'm on a very short list of countries, not bother investing in tickets to come to the United States.
Yeah, I think, and it's only going to get worse, probably, you would think, next year and going into 2028 with the Olympics. But to take a step back, for those who aren't paying attention, the FIFA World Cup, Club World Cup, to be clear, not the World Cup, which is going to be next year, but the Club World Cup is happening in the U.S. right now. It's kind of like a dress rehearsal-ish for the World Cup next year. But it doesn't even really have the best teams, but it's a very complicated formula, but 32, I believe, of the best teams in the world from literally all over the world, including MLS teams, are in this tournament. And it started Sunday or Saturday night, I guess. The reason why these folks are there is because Latinos like soccer. Like, let's just keep it 100. Yeah. We don't have to make this more. Tom, God bless you. I think he knew when he said he didn't even get it. He got it. Latinos like soccer, and it's just racially profiling people, and I guess trying to scare people into self-deporting or running away or hiding, what have you. It is so anti-American. It like hurts to just be like, you can't even show up somewhere without showing your papers because you're brown. To me, it's like, it is part and parcel of what this. It doesn't surprise me what this administration is all about, but that is what this is about. It is about, and Stephen Miller has essentially said it from the White House. He's like, I want to. If you're brown, you're immediately a suspect. You get no due process, and you have to prove to me that you have to be here and not, or that you get to be here and not assume that you are an American or legally here in America. So it is chilling. It also is going to affect. I mean, I wonder what FIFA is going to think of all this, right? They have a lot at stake with not just the Club World Cup, but obviously the World Cup next year. It's the biggest event, obviously, that they put on. And if Latinos, people of Hispanic heritage, brown-skinned humans don't want to come to America to watch the World Cup, like because they're in fear of being put in jail, that is going to be a problem for them financially. And it is. I gotta think that they don't love it, but I also gotta think that it's a pretty corrupt organization itself.
Yeah, and
so God really knows what kind of deals they'll cut.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, FIFA's hard to track because of their entanglements.
Yes.
It's important to note also that they're having trouble selling tickets for these games, and some are speculating that this in part is because of the chilling effect. And there's a lot of activity in Miami here, and a lot of people who have legal status just don't want to be bothered. I don't blame them. Like, if you think about it, like, if you were stopped on the street, how would you prove you're a citizen? I could, if you gave me time to go home, I could find my birth certificate and my passport, but I don't carry it with me, So it's like, I have my driver's license, but depending on where you live, that doesn't prove what you needed to prove. And just like and sometimes I don't carry anything on me. So it's like, you catch somebody at the wrong time, and that could be it for them. And you just don't want to be bothered. You don't want to be singled out. In situations like this, it is troubling. You also have the fact that the World Cup extends North America, and inherent in that is some sense that it should be relatively easy for us to go down to Mexico and then to come up here to watch games, and that is certainly not true. And never mind the relationship with Canada, where it's been harder. I don't know if you've been following this, but it's been harder to cross the border than it's ever been before. There are certain towns, like in border towns, like in places like Washington, that are being decimated because of the free flow of traffic is harder than it's ever been. Never mind just the acrimony, right? Like the idea of going to Canada as an American, like, it just doesn't appeal in the same way, because I'm embarrassed, and like I feel like there would be some understandable hostility.
I mean, they literally elected a guy basically who the liberals should have lost that election, but
right,
because they were trying to send a message to the United States to go fuck ourselves, they elected a guy who seems to be fine. But it's a big deal in Mexico. I can't claim to know Mexican politics like I do Canadian, but I can't imagine they are loving all of this, right? And it's a sad commentary on where we are. Obviously, like, it is supposed to be, especially the World Cup, but even this Club World Cup, like, celebratory events. Sports are supposed to bring us together, and to essentially turn sporting events into mass deportation threats is like, it feels like dictator shit, because it is dictator shit, and people are going to just stay away because they don't want to be bothered. And one thing I want to say on the politics side, my wife works on this issue a lot, is like, a lot of these policies, like sanctuary cities and things like that, are there to protect people,
right?
Because otherwise, people who witness crimes or are victims of crimes themselves are not willing to come forward to law enforcement to report them, because they're afraid of being deported or what have you. And so, like, you're actually putting some of these events at risk. You're putting people at risk by by these policies, and I hate that it might require something really catastrophic happening. Not that it hasn't already. They murdered fucking American elected officials last weekend, but like, something catastrophic to happen for people to realize that, like, this is just xenophobia and racism, and not, these are, the people that are being targeted here, people who want to go watch soccer, are not like sure, they're criminals and we should deport them, but like this is not what this is about. They're not doing a dragnet of the FIFA World Cup to catch criminals. They're doing it to around people.
And that's where like the term sanctuary city, I think, is a term that means different things in different contexts. And in New York, we've had a big debate around like the ins and outs of what it means and all that. And so like, I don't even know like what my general opinion on the overall concept is, depending on where you live. But one thing I could say for sure is these dragnet, like we're going to all restaurants, we're going to the Home Depot, we're going to schools, we're going to hospitals, we're going to sporting events, and just rounding people up and profiling them is awful and is not the way this should go. Like, and this was the debate that was happening within ICE with Stephen Miller, is like the people within ICE wanted to target people who have criminal records, who've broken other laws other than immigration laws, and saying those are the people we're going after. And Stephen Miller wanted these, huge operations in places like Home Depots. And Stephen Miller was winning that. There is an important caveat, which is the administration clarified that there are certain places, for at least for the time being, and you can never really trust anything to last very long, but that they were going to exempt certain institutions like meatpacking plants because they have big donors who own these companies, and agricultural workers, right? Because they're looking at rural areas, right? So somehow now we have this thing where you can't go to a soccer match, but you can go work on a farm or at a meatpacking plant because those are Republican donors. That's where we are today.
It's a damn shame, man. Well, we should take a look at the vice president and what he said about the World Cup next year. We got a video of sort of the veiled, maybe not so veiled threats that the administration has been making.
This incredible event. I know we'll have visitors probably from close to 100 countries. We want them to come. We want them to celebrate. We want them to watch the game. But when the time is up, they'll have to go home. Otherwise, they'll have to talk to Secretary Noem, who I'll turn it over to now.
It's like, what? No shit. They don't want to stay here. People want to go back home because they want to go back home. It's their home. That is not how you welcome the world to your country for an international event, to say the least.
We just don't deserve, this is like harsh words. We just don't deserve the leadership role that we are clinging to right now, like in this country, like hosting a World Cup, hosting the Olympics, housing the United Nations, being a member of NATO, the quote unquote leader of the free world, right? These are roles and responsibilities that are earned. And right now we have not earned them by our behavior. And it hurts me to say, because I've worked at the UN. I care about these institutions. I love living in a country that is the quote unquote leader of the free world, but we are like laughably unworthy of the leadership that we assume right now. And to me, it's like an accident of previous, beneficial acts of many administrations, and like a lot of goodwill that we built up that we even get these events. And if I were another country, including like so-called allies of the U.S., which obviously is like a complicated term now, I would not vote for sending anything like this to the U.S. ever again until, I don't even know. Like, even if there's a Democratic administration, it's like you vote for this during Biden, but then the next administration, when thing's going to happen, is going to do this kind of bullshit. It's like, It sucks.
Well, apparently the Trump administration is preparing travel restrictions too that may affect the ability of citizens from as many as 43 countries from entering the country next year. It just is I will say, I know something about the public opinion around this issue, and there's no doubt that there is a rightward lean of the country on immigration issues. I think the problem is, it goes back to what you said about Secretary Noem. People don't know what's happening. They just hear crackdown and they assume criminal. And to be fair, or not fair, but to give them credit where credit is not due, the administration is doing a good job of branding what they're doing as going after criminals.
Right.
But that is not actually what they're doing. And so we are going to be in a place where people can't come, people don't want to come. And to your point, I'm not sure we deserve to have them here to host them. And God knows, after what happened this weekend in Washington too, the president's going to turn it into a celebration of himself.
Right.
I realized, unfortunately for the listeners, I'm going to force you guys to realize this too, but the World Cup is the 4th of July of next year, which is the 250th centennial celebration of the United States, happens in the middle of the World Cup. And it is, I can only imagine how the president is going to try to make it about himself. Yes. And about whatever nonsense he wants to promote, as opposed to the United States, especially, and to have a global stage to do that on, sends shivers down my spine to think about what message that's gonna send the country in the middle of a sporting event that's supposed to show the best of our country. It's probably gonna end up showing the worst, and I'm on your side. The more I talk it out, we don't deserve this.
The world is gonna root against us, and it's like, I'm not kidding. Who am I kidding? Like, it's like, of course, like even over the summer in the Olympics with the basketball, like there's a certain kind of rooting against us because we're so successful in some of these sports, like not soccer, but I think the world generally doesn't want to see us to be really good at soccer because we're really good at a lot of other sports. But it will take a different tone. Like this would be personal in a different kind of way. It will go beyond sports hatred. And I honestly, we took this beautiful series of events, World Cup through Olympics, which should be like an all-time run for American sports. And it's going to be ugly, or has a high chance of being ugly. And that's just what they're bringing here. So on that beautiful note,
happy note,
everybody out there, if you're watching this on video, subscribe to us at the Game Within podcast. If you're listening to this on Majority 54, go subscribe on the Game Within feed. Because at some point we'll be dropping this exclusively there. Have a great weekend. I always forget what Jason's send off for this is. Sports matter. Is that right?
Yeah.
Just remember that sports matter.
Quite a lot. It's fun talking about it too.
All right.
Appreciate it.